lovelies. Welcome to episode 3. I feel like this is quite a milestone. I hope you agree. All right, so let's have a chat about confidence, knowing your worth, and how you move through the world, right? So it's the intersection of all these things. So I had a little thing happen this past week, and I think it was such a learning moment that I thought I would bring it to you all. So I think how we move through the world is so important. Look at this guy. Isn't he adorable? Anyway, so how you move through the world is so important. Because I always repeat this, how you do one thing is how you do everything. But the truth is that we will always come up against situations. And he's cleaning his butt. That's really... Oh, it's his leg. I'm sorry. So improper of me. So we all come up against challenges in life. And then we need to kind of take away the lesson, right? Take the lesson away from the situation. What happened to me was that there was, I went in for an interview, for an audition. The person behind the desk decided that it was their day to play a series of the intersectionality of classism and ethnocentrism and nationalism. And I was just the recipient of that. But what was interesting was not what I was met with, but rather how I responded. I could say I responded the way I wanted to respond, but it wasn't until much later that I recognized not what was happening, but rather I allowed this person to kind of enter my mind space and kind of move things around for a little bit, right? I allowed this person to get in my head, in other words. And, the audition was fine. It wasn't my greatest. It wasn't my worst by far. So, did it impact me to the nth degree? No. But did it throw me off my game a little bit? Absolutely. So, we're going to discuss. Right? Because I think this is part of the artist path. We are met every day with people that decide to act in certain ways, but ultimately it is up to us how we choose to respond. And while I did not tell this person anything, I did not say anything, I just laughed it off, I did allow the person to enter my mind space. And there is this wonderful lesson that somebody taught me many, many years ago, that you have to be vigilant at the helm of your mind, at the gates of your mind. And I love the idea and the imagery of being at the helm and at the forefront of the gates of your mind, right? That image is so strong for me. And I think we can really discuss this and have a teachable moment for all of us here, right? That just because somebody chooses to enact something seemingly against you, that it is always your choice and how you choose to respond. In this moment, I chose to respond by laughing it off, but ultimately it did impact a little the work. And I love something that one of my teachers taught me, that they said, it is always ultimately about the work. That, our industry is one filled with, sometimes ego traps and ego games, but it is up to you to kind of center in and root in what is important, which is ultimately the work, right? It is the work that you do that brings power, right? It brings power to companies that you choose to align with. It brings power to the stories you choose to create and enact and be a part of, and the projects that you bring your energy to. Your energy is so important. I'm sorry, my nose is itching. um, the energy that you bring to each project, to each idea, to what you create is ultimately the magic that you bring to the work. And so, what is important ultimately, and I remember that this was one of the like pillars of what I was taught growing up, was that at the end of the day, you need to know who you are, what you're about, and where you're going. And that has always stayed with me, right? Because if you know who you are and you know what you're about, in other words, what your purpose is in life, or what your mission is, or why you're doing what you're doing, or the gifts that you bring to the world, and where you're going, right? The vision that you have for your life, nothing can move you, right? You will be an immovable mountain. You will be a force to be reckoned with. And I wish, I had brought a little bit of that, but ultimately I chose to laugh it off. And just, later on I was like, I called my friend and I was like, oh my God, you will not believe what happened. And she was, adequately flabbergasted by it. But ultimately it isn't about that, right? It is about the work. It is about what you bring to the table. That is all it is. And so this idea and this lesson of standing at the helm of your mind is so important, especially when you are in the arts field or even in the entertainment field, right? Because there are so many ego games and ego traps that people can kind of find themselves playing, or like trapped in. You're never fully trapped. You are choosing to engage in people's mind games. But ultimately, it is up to you to not allow that to enter. And only when you allow that not to enter your mind, your heart, your energy, then you become unshakable, right? And we are here about empowering artists and becoming ever more unshakable artists. Not unshakable in that we are not like open-hearted and empathetic, of course not. That isn't what it is. But that we are fully engaged and knowing what our purpose is, who we are, and what we bring to the table, and what those gifts are that ultimately free society and free the world. Because a society without its artists is a society without culture. Culture is important, right? It's a part of who we are, right? It defines our societies. And it is thanks to artists that we have that, right? That we are able to impact that. Going back to the Greeks in theater, it was the way that society was able to impact so much, even in their time, trauma. And there was this aspect of transmuting emotions, and that the artist was both the artist and a magician, and the purveyor of emotion for an audience. So I think that that's really important. And so as we go through our day-to-day life, as we walk through the world, we can never know what we are going to be faced with. But, as they say, gird your loins. Is that the sentiment behind it? I'm not sure. I might be wrong. Check in the comments. But ultimately, it is about our own empowerment, right? And when you know who you are centered in your own power, not some external power that is structural by nature, and therefore you choose to enact a certain way to because you're feeling a certain way that day, when you have power over others, but when you have power over yourself and over your mind, that is when it's important, right? Because then you are at the helm of yourself, right? And that's how you move through the world. So sometimes people will act in certain ways, and you cannot allow them to shift you out of your joy, right? I think that that is true in terms of self-empowerment. And I think that there are so many things that happen within our industry that we feel powerless, but ultimately it is a choice to feel powerless, right? We can allow things to stop us in the case of not getting a grant, for instance, to create our work. Or we can say, like, I'm not going to let the lack of funding stop me from doing what I need to do. I need to do this, or I need to do that, or I need to connect with that person, or I need to connect with a network that will allow me the resources to create what I create, right? So in this can be applied to so many different things. When we don't get a grant, when we don't get into the fellowship, when we don't get into the internship, when we don't get into grad school, right? Or when we're met against larger structural issues within a societal framework. And so it is always asking us, are we going to allow ourselves to hand over power to another person and to feel disempowered? Or are we going to take arms against, the foes? It's very Shakespearean. I do work with Shakespeare, so there you go. Are we going to take up arms against, the ego, really? Because it's either other people's ego or our own that like kind of gets in the way. And ultimately, you need to be driven by the understanding and the knowing, the inner knowing of like what you bring to the table, who you are, where you're going, what your purpose is, and what your gifts are to bring to the world. And your gifts are important because they are meant to be shared with the world. And within that empowerment, we can then find confidence. Confidence isn't this flighty idea of like, oh, or like, yeah, and yes, quotes do matter, like the what are those called, the things that you keep telling, mantras, right? Mantras are so great to help us on that journey, but ultimately it is rooting in to what you bring to the world. It's rooting into the work that you have done. It is rooting into the training that you have had. It is rooting into your core person, to knowing why your gifts are important in the world, right? And usually your gifts are important to the world because it is what drives you to tell a story. Like, oh, I really connect to these kinds of stories, or I really connect to painting these flowers because I want to bring beauty to the world, or I really want to, share the injustices and give voice to the voiceless. Those are all important ideas and ideals for a society, especially within the scope of a society as we see now. Everything that is going on around the world, artists are needed to give voice, either to beauty, to remembering the beauty, to remembering what is connection and community, whatever reason behind your own connection to your work and whatever it brings to people. That is the confidence that you need to seek within. And confidence isn't an external thing. It isn't an internal unpacking. Like, who are you? Where do you come from? Why is that important? Why does that inspire you? where do you want to go? Why is that vision holding you, and where is it taking you? All those things are important. And that's ultimately where confidence lies. Confidence also lies in the doing of the work, in the centering of like, I am doing the work. I am actively doing the work. And much like I said in my first episode, where I asked if nobody was looking at your work, if you weren't seen, would you still do what you do? That is centering into why you do what you do. Because no matter if there are eyes or no eyes, you are going on your path and based on your mission. And those are lofty ideas, but ultimately what a mission is why do you do what you do? Right? When you fill out a grant, it's like, so why do you do your work? Or, some element of that question. Like it is like, why do you do what you do? Why are you an artist? It's Simon Sinek's, and I mentioned this before in one of my previous episodes, starting with your why, because that's your mission, that's your purpose, right? Understanding that there are certain needs of a society or of a community, right? I got a scholarship for the director's workshop at La Mama. And there was this one Native American artistic director. And I loved what she was saying, that she was talking about healing her community through theater, and how that was the purpose of their productions, of their work in the community, and that they were working in community. So why do you do what you do? That's an important question. And that's the confidence, right? That's where the confidence comes. And it also is like, obviously, especially when you're younger, there's so much fear clouding everything, right? But ultimately it's chipping away and training, and it's doing those, if you're an actor, doing those awful animal exercises, which actually do help in creating a character, But it's chipping away. It's going to class. It is fine tuning your instrument. It is doing the work day after day after day, right? Despite resistance, despite what, your family might say, or despite what society might tell you, artists are needed because they are the magicians of society. They are the priestesses of their time, right? Before, we used to have high priestesses in pyramids that told us about God's word, but now we have artists, right, who channel energies and emotions to bring about a character, or channel a picture, or a book. They are our connection to the creative principle, the principle of creation. So, yeah. So that's confidence. And I think that those two intersecting ideas and ideals help us root into who we are as a society. It's important to be confident. It is important to believe in yourself. And through that self-confidence, that will be the foundation of self-belief. I know how to do my thing. Like, oh, that was a really awful audition. Right? I've had those kinds of auditions, especially at the very beginning. now I like work harder than I think I need to. So most auditions I can always take something out of. I'm like, oh, there wasn't much flow, but my character work was on point, right? Or like when I'm creating something, like, oh, I'm having issues around this in the script. Let me let me take a moment away and then I'll come back. Because in that allowing that to breathe, then I can come back with more, right? And it's the confidence and knowing I'm going to go and I'm going to have some great ideas, and then I'm going to come back and sit down and write. That's confidence. That is self-belief, understanding how you do work, how you work. Those are two different things. How you do the thing that you do, how you like to work, right? What inspires you. All of that adds into the self-belief. Self-belief is also self-belief is also self-belief is also tuning out the noise. This self-belief is tuning out the noise of the casting director. Self-belief is tuning out the noise of an unsupportive family, or a family that wants you to hit it big, and why haven't you hit it big, and where are you going to go, and why isn't why are you this age. And it's tuning out the noise. It's tuning out the noise of your agent that says like, you're not going to go anywhere with that. Oh, you need to be famous before you get like a pilot. I had a manager that said that. I was like, what? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense to me. So these are all components, right? And so these are the foundation. We are talking about foundational aspects to artistry. And then you can go and like dream about and like, have ambitions and go after your dreams. But in order to go after your dreams, you have to have some sense of self-belief. You have to have some sense of self-confidence. You have to be able to tune out the noise. You have to be able to put on your blinders and move toward the vision of your life. And I know that this conversation has become so much bigger than really what it started out as, but I think that these are the intersections of self-confidence and self-belief and being in your own power. Because as we move through the world, as we move through the journey of our artistic field, of our career, of the work, we will be asked to hand over our power. And it is our choice whether we choose to do that or we choose to self-believe and to have self-confidence and to know where we're going and to know what we're about and who we are. Because there will be many people in society that tell you that because you're Black or because you're Latino or because you're poor or because you don't have any contacts in the world, that you are not going to be able to do in your life what you were meant to do. And that's simply not true. Because in the act of walking through moment to moment, I loved the story of the alchemist, because I believe that there is some truth to that. That as we make a decision in our present moment, that the world conspires to see us to that moment. And it is my belief that the person that needs to be your number one fan is you. There was that Issa Rae workshop on Masterclass that I watched. And she said, like, you need to be your own hype man. You are your number one fan. Absolutely. And look at the amazing, beautiful things that she has done. Given, you know, she's super intelligent and she's gone to one of the best schools. Absolutely. We cannot take that away from her. She is absolutely fabulous. But I think that she inspires us to move forward in our dreams, because you need to be your number one hype man. Because you need to stand at the helm of your mind, right? That's an aspect of kind of putting on your blinders. And this is what I can say for certain, that no matter what, nobody can take away who you are, what you're about, what your vision is for the world, and your gifts. Nobody can take away your gifts. Those are yours to do with or not to do with as you please. But I do believe, much like the writer of Do the Work, right? Oh, what's his name? Stephen Pressfield. In the book War of Art, Stephen Pressfield says that, and this is paraphrased, that the more you ignore your gifts, the louder the voices become, until you are almost compelled to do what you were brought to this world to do, right? If you believe that. I believe that. At the foundation of the work we do is who we are, what we're about, what our gifts are, and what we're meant to do in the world. And it's this intersectionality of doing the work, training, right? Educating ourselves, expanding our level of work, the quality of our work. And that leads to self-confidence and self-belief. And you need to be your own hype man. That's the takeaway. Anyway, it was awesome having a chat with you. I'm finally going to have a drink. It's just soda. Bye. Let's talk about flow for episode 4.